the Amazonian region, over the last 2 or 3 years, you're seeing a rise in the killings of indigenous activists fighting against their forests being handed over to the extractive sector or to the logging industry. And that particular case is quite emblematic of also another interesting phenomenon, which is that you're seeing greater investment by Chinese companies and Chinese banks, etc., in the region, in extractive sector projects and infrastructure projects that affect forested areas, as Canadian companies and as American companies and European companies sell their companies to the Chinese companies because they unsuccessfully tried to extract those resources or to have some kind of problem there. So that case is emblematic of these wider killings, and these wider killings have happened over the last 2-3 years and have intensified.
I want to turn to Wilfredo Saavedra Moreras, president of the Environmental Defense Front of Cajamarca in the Andes of northern Peru. Through mass protests, residents of the region have successfully stalled plans by the U.S. firm Newmont to destroy mountain lakes in order to construct the massive open-pit Conga gold mine. In 2012, the struggle made national headlines when police waged a crackdown, killing 5 people. Peruvian President Ollanta Humala has backed the Conga mine project. Saavedra and fellow environmental defenders have traveled across Peru to denounce the project in Lima on Monday. They marched through the streets to demand protection of their water, and Saavedra talked about repression they faced on their journey.
We have made an effort, even though they have criminalized our social protest. Even though the police have tried to prevent us from arriving in Lima, they have seized our cars. There's been constant police harassment of a lot of our marching brigades. Because we have come from town to town, making use of our own resources, making community meals to feed ourselves from the 3rd of December until this morning when we arrived here in Lima. And despite all of that, they have not been able to break our unity and our fierce will to come here to Lima to express ourselves.
That was Wilfredo Saavedra Moreras, president of the Environmental Defense Front of Cajamarca in the Peruvian Andes. Chris.
Yeah, and that's really indicative of a problem that Peru's had over the last decade in terms of state security forces killing environmental and land defenders. And interestingly enough, the Humala government recently passed a law 30151, which grants immunity from prosecution for state security forces as they carry out their duties in the case that they should use violence against, say, peaceful protesters. So the primary agents of the killings of environmental land defenders in Peru are now being given carte blanche to essentially, crack down and use as much violence as they want, and they will not be prosecuted. And furthermore, in the decade that preceded the passage of this law, not one single individual policeman or army official was taken to court and prosecuted for the killings of these defenders. So that it's really an outrage, and civil society has come out strongly against it, including Amnesty International, that has called it a major breach of the right to peaceful assembly.
That's very interesting in light of where we're speaking right now. We're speaking in Pentagonito, right? This is where the UN summit is taking place. Wilfredo Saavedra Moreras, the president of the Environmental Defense Front of Cajamarca, who we just heard, was denouncing this also on the street, that the UN climate summit that is taking place here at Pentagonito, that the COP is a sham as he marched through the streets of Lima.
COP20 is nothing more than a kind of deception. It's a farce. That's how we perceive it. The representatives of the states of the world are meeting in a place that is stained with blood. In the Pentagonito, that military base, they have extrajudicially executed our brothers. They have burned them. They have disappeared them. Many people, including members of the Andean police, were burned there. And that cannot be anything but a display of the public shame of what Peru is. Ollanta Humala, being the host of the governments of the world, spending millions of dollars, close to $90 million for this summit that doesn't accomplish anything other than lyrical declarations of commitments against the effects of climate change. They have not amounted to anything for 20 years. And today, the people cannot be heard because they have created security zones. 5 security zones where we are not going to be able to get in. We're not going to be able to get in to express our position, our voice.
Herrera's president of the Environmental Defense Fund of Cajamarca, denouncing the COP being right here in Pentagonito, which, we see we're sort of in the shadow of it and have learned about where so many were killed and tortured here, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely, and it paints a kind of murkier image of the progressive image that Peru is trying to portray to the world in terms of its fight against climate change. The progressive image it likes to portray is that, look, we're going to conserve 75% of our forests in an effort to stop deforestation, which, as we know, accounts for 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions here in Peru, and we're also going to reduce to zero net deforestation by 2020. But the reality, as we've just heard, is far different. I mean, you're looking at environmental land defenders being killed, precisely trying to protect the forests against extractive sector projects. And also, the government of Peru has assigned almost 20 million hectares to the oil industry and to the logging industry in the Amazon. So there's this kind of contradiction between its progressive image of trying to conserve its forests, but at the same time prioritizing extractive sector development, which will lead to deforestation and greater greenhouse gas emissions.